Hey everybody, welcome to this webinar today with Riskalyze and with Vanilla. I am Aaron Klein, one of the co-founders and CEO of Riskalyze. And with me is Steve Lockshin, who is the founder and CEO of Vanilla. And we're excited to spend some time with you today. Riskalyze sent out this invitation to advisors that have loved and used the Riskalyze product for a long time because one of the topics that we hear a lot about from you is questions about estate planning. I think sometimes that happens because maybe you've got the Riskalyze lead generation questionnaire built into your website, and when a prospective client is walking through that, they're clicking that one of their objectives and one of their goals is retirement. You might be an active Riskalyze user and be using retirement maps to like show that 60-second path to retirement. To a client when you're trying to, or to a prospective client when you're trying to engage them on risk and engage them in a discussion about your service offering as an advisor in the first place. And the really interesting question is, what should advisors do about the topic of estate planning? And my buddy Steve Lockshin actually started a company to work on that. But before we get into that, I just want to recognize that I've co-founded exactly one company serving financial advisors. Okay, this guy is like the Beethoven of financial advisor, entrepreneurial activity. Steve, you've started a bunch of companies serving financial advisors. So take us, spend a minute and kind of take us through your career to date serving financial advisors.
And I don't know if I get credit for starting lots of companies that serve financial advisors, maybe as being involved in a bunch of companies. So I get a lot of credit for smart people like you who I have had the opportunity to invest in. My business all along has been financial advisory for wealthy folks, and that's why estate planning has been a piece and an important piece of it, and we'll talk about that. But really, for 30 years, I've built and run and sold a couple RIAs, but all doing the same thing and for generally the same customers. Along the way, we built companies like Fortigent, which was sold to LPL, and really was designed to solve our problems about reporting, which way back when we were running Advent and DOS, and it was TPP, for those of you who are old enough to remember that, we wanted something that looked different and did things a little differently than that. So that was kind of my first foray into tech. And then I got lucky and met the Betterment people, so I invested in that. And from that, I met the Quovo people, and I ended up on their board and invested in that. And from that, I met the advisor people. And one thing, this is how we met. And everybody seems to know everybody in the fintech space, which has been great. I did swear I would never go back into the software business, and here I am back in the software business.
There you go.
But we'll find out why.
That's awesome. So today it's two hats, because Advice Period is your RIA business headquartered there in Los Angeles, but it's got like a national footprint, doesn't it?
Yes, we've got advisors all over the country.
Yep. And then you just co-founded not too long ago, but you just co-founded Vanilla, which is growing like a weed. And that's focused on that ever-present topic of estate planning and how advisors should tackle that, right?
Exactly. It was again born out of necessity for ourselves, and really was built for us. Then when we built the prototype, we thought other people might enjoy this as well.
That's awesome. That's super cool. Well, let's dive in then. I mean, you've first of all, your team has created this super cool deck, which I think we're going to flash a picture on the screen so everybody can see it. Right, the top 4 things. Oops, we've got a desktop there. There we go. The top 4 things every advisor wants to know about estate planning. And this has some great details that frankly we'll just share with everybody after the event. So don't worry, you don't have to like write every single thing down that is said. We're going to send you this deck out, and it'll give you some great pointers back to that. But Steve, let's dive in and let's start at the question. If I'm a financial advisor who's on here, I'm obviously a little bit intrigued by the concept of doing estate planning for clients, but maybe I've been just a little bit more focused on the traditional work of a financial advisor with investment management, maybe some financial planning, things like that. Like what is estate planning, and why should it matter to me as a financial advisor?
So let's tackle the second, or I guess your first question first, which is what is estate planning?
Yeah.
Basically, it's making sure that your estate, what you've built, and we'll talk about who it matters for, follows the law and goes where you want it to go. And it's the question we always ask, which is the who, what, when. Who do you want to get what, and when do you want them to get it? And that may be charity, it may be your spouse, it may be your heirs. If you don't have a spouse and kids, it may be other people that are important to you. And then depending on your wealth, it also means very, very different things. So that's the what is, and we can dig into that a little bit. The why really is a differentiator. If we go back again, I think I dated myself already, but when I first started, and this business was pretty simple. You talk to a client and say, well, how old are you? And they say, I'm 40. Great. You should have 40% in US bonds and 60% in US stocks that I'm going to pick. And that's all the advisors focused on. They got paid on assets under management. And
Yeah.
sadly, I think there's still a large amount of people that only sell investment management.
Right.
Financial planning obviously has turned into a very, very big part of what advisors do. It's part of what you guys help advisors with, engaging their risk, understanding what a client needs, when to make certain decisions. And the estate plan is just a fundamental part of the financial planning. The problem is most advisors aren't paid for it and most don't understand it.
Right.
And so how do they make sure they're doing a good job for their clients? It's important enough, and that it's part and parcel of what they're doing in that relationship. And so that's the why. It's a differentiator from the other folks that are just doing investments or just doing investments in financial planning. I think it's the last frontier that really hasn't been hit in our space.
Yeah, that's really interesting. If I hear you correctly on that, then a lot of the stuff that I tend to tangentially touch, perhaps as a financial advisor, around taxes and thinking about, kind of the here and now of tax planning, has a lot of connectivity to how I might be able to help my clients think better about estate planning down the line, right?
Undoubtedly. Particularly if they're, so I think we should probably break it into two parts. There's more than two parts in the deck. You'll see three, and I'd call it of the three. It's the 0 to 2 million. It's the 2 million up to the estate tax limit, the exemption, which is 11.7 million per person now, going down to about 6 million in 2026, and then everybody above the tax limit. But let's just talk about the typical client that's less than a couple $1,000,000. If you've got kids, and I know you've got kids,
Yep.
it's really important to make sure that we know who's taking care of them if something happens to the parents.
Right.
And that may very well be the most important part of the plan, particularly if you don't have significant assets.
Right.
If you do have assets, it's making sure they end up in the right place and that they don't end up in probate, that the state doesn't unnecessarily take probate fees on them, that it's not
Yep.
public if you don't want your stuff to be public. Just that, again, who gets what you want them to get and when they get it. And even insurance, which a lot of advisors do work on, is part of estate planning. But how does it fit into your documents and where you own it? And then after, I'll talk about the larger clients where you can really make a much bigger impact on the family net worth than you can with investments, because the estate tax is 40%, the transfer tax. And so
Yep.
you save somebody $1 of you move $1 out of their state, you get a 40% instant return. Try getting that in investment performance.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I've been learning more about that myself recently, just thinking about that, because my wife and we do have 3 kids, but I've always liked that Warren Buffett principle of, like, you should leave your kids enough money that they can do anything, but not so much that they can afford to do nothing,
Right.
And so we intend to do a lot with charity with our estate, but there's a lot of, particularly for those who want to prioritize that, certainly leave some healthy money to their kids, but like prioritize a lot towards charity. there's a bunch of different structures that solid estate planning can kind of create to help people prioritize that.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to tax leverage. It's
Yep.
saving on capital gains with,
Yep.
charitable remainder trusts or lead trusts. It's fulfilling your charitable desires.
Yep.
There's lots of stuff you can do. And one of the things that people typically, in fact, you just said it, typically talk about is leaving my kids this
Yep.
amount of money, because that's the
Yep.
traditional way of doing things. Most of our clients subscribe to a similar philosophy that you and I subscribe to, which is, I want to make sure that the things I care about are taken care of, which is school generally, some help with a roof over their head,
Yep.
a emergency fund in case there's medical issues or emergencies, but again, enough that they can do something and not so much they can do nothing. Well,
Yep.
just because you get a lot of money out of your estate doesn't mean it needs to end up in anybody's hands.
Yep.
So you could do very, very good planning, and like we've done in our family, our kids will never get a lump sum inheritance. And I hope they're not listening, but they've heard this, and they'll get a stipend so
Yep.
that they can enjoy themselves a little bit, go on a vacation they might not have been able to, decorate a room of their house every couple years or so, but not
Yep.
so much that they can sit on their rear end and do nothing.
Yep.
So estate planning is really for your estate, not just for your kids.
Yep. That's great. So if I'm a financial advisor, talk to me about how I can really use estate planning to differentiate my practice and kind of the value that it delivers compared to the prototypical financial advisor down the street.
So the good news is the bar is super, super low. Um, if you do nothing but ask a client, do you have your documents, and get copies of that and go through the checklist and make sure they've done everything, I'd say you're probably ahead of the majority of the industry. If you are willing to take it to the next step, and then, I don't want to spend too much time talking about vanilla, but it's one of the problems we solved was good advisors were asking for the information, but they couldn't tell if it was good or not. They couldn't
Mm,
tell if it was up to date with changing tax law. So for example, this past year in New York changed their healthcare powers, and lawyers are not in a position where they proactively go out to everyone because there's a conflict of interest. If I call Aaron, but I don't call Steve, then I've treated Aaron better than I've treated Steve. So the easy thing
right.
to do is send out an email to all my clients and hope they read it and hope they call in and update things. But nobody likes dealing with their estate planning. It's just like
Right.
insurance. It's bought. I mean, it's sold. It's not bought. So estate
Mhm.
planning is something you have to do. So what we did was we gave advisors the ability to upload documents, and then our team and technology will review those and tell them if they're up to date with current laws, if they've got the right feature set in there, and give our clients, the advisors, a beautiful labeled package that they can get, a PDF that they can give their clients to review whether or not your planning is up to speed. So now advisors in doing their job aren't just making sure the clients have docs, but they're making sure they have the right docs. And then
Okay,
if they
so
add,
if I hear that correctly, part of the value proposition that you can fairly easily add to your practice with vanilla is simply the process of like, let's do a checkup on your estate planning documents and see if they look complete.
yep.
Got it.
And what we built into it was effectively an estate planning CRM that gets all the data and then lets the advisor know when the client should update their information.
Mm.
So you may have picked, Joe Bag of Donuts as your fiduciary, and that was 10 years ago. It turns out you don't even like Joe anymore. But, God forbid you get hit by a bus and Joe Bag of Donuts is your fiduciary, and that's not what you wanted.
Right.
So part of the software is to help advisors to check in with their clients and say, Aaron, do you still want Joe as your fiduciary? Oh, no, Joe, I don't even like Joe anymore. Check
Yeah.
this box. It'll help you change it. So it's make sure they got the right information, make sure it's updated, and reminders to stay on top of it so their clients have the right things in place.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I've always flip-flopped whoever's my favorite sister as my executor. You just move it back and forth and um
Well, since that's a horrible job, you've got to reverse. You have to give it to the sister
oh
you
yeah, to
like
be clear,
less.
it's the one who's not my favorite
Got
sister that I flip into role for sure. Like that's absolutely how that works. Yeah, that makes sense. So okay, so there's the point of checking up on a client or a prospective client's current documents, just make sure that they're good. But then Vanilla will also help them, create a new set of documents or create the first set of documents if they need to, right? Like that's part of the value proposition there.
So that was the second problem that we had to solve, which was we knew that most clients had documents that didn't really hit the bar that we thought was appropriate. And
Yep,
so how could we create a system that would crank out great documents, the kinds of documents that we've used from top law firms, have our own law firm in place so that advisors didn't have to worry about UPL, the unauthorized practice of law, so we
right.
protect advisors, and make it more efficient than going to a typical lawyer, which, as most of us know, is a phone call, a visit scheduled in normal times, a few weeks out, lots of time spent back and forth, and a couple months before you see the documents and a big bill. We want
Yeah,
it to be really easy, online, 20 to 30 minutes. You can sit there with your spouse and go through the information. It cranks out the documents. You have a lawyer review, and it costs a fraction of what it normally costs to do things, and with
got
better
it,
documents.
got it. And I would envision that has a pretty powerful impact on how advisors can kind of deepen relationships with clients and also increase the retention of those clients.
I think so. I mean, a couple of things are true if you really do someone's estate plan.
Yeah.
You know all about their family. You know
Mhm.
how much money they have, so you know their whole balance sheet, and share of wallet's always important to advisors, and that's why we have so much aggregation technology, just like you do.
Yep.
Um, Knowing their health, because if there
Yep.
are matters, those typically come up in the estate plan. Knowing their philosophy around money is something that comes out because of the dispositive terms in the estate plan. So it's a very, very intimate part of the relationship, but more importantly, it's incredibly necessary because nobody wants to be the advisor that when somebody dies unexpectedly is explaining why none of this stuff was in place.
Right. The family aspect is another really interesting one that you just said, because the fact that you're in the loop on helping to advise where the funds go puts you into a stronger position to begin building a relationship with, what was very often, the kids, the next generation, right? And that is, at least from what I've seen, like that is one of the great challenges that advisors face with the retention is that, the generation one passes on, and all of a sudden generation two says, well, I don't know who you are, so I'm starting from scratch and deciding who to work with, and it's probably not my dad's financial advisor. We're actually, one of the leaders on my team recently had his father pass away, and so he, flies to Florida, trying to help his family, three siblings, elderly mom, all those kinds of things, and he's sitting there trying to decide, kind of what to do in that circumstance. And, he doesn't know that financial advisor from Adam. And so he's sitting there, he's got no reason to keep those assets with that existing financial advisor. He's got one himself in California. All it would have taken was that financial advisor building a little bit of relationship with him as his, dad and mom's trustee, right? For those assets to probably stay there. But the reality is they're probably going to move because he's sitting there with zero relationship with that financial advisor on the other side. And if the financial advisor knew that he was the trustee, knew that he was going to be the person, working to make those kinds of decisions, I'll bet that financial advisor might have been able to take some other action there.
Yeah, it's back to low bars. This is why we see politicians, again, in non-COVID times, standing on the corner and waving, why there are signs with their names out there, because brand and name recognition is so important, and particularly in personal relationships like this.
Yep.
So that PDF, or if they go online, because the online balance sheet, which has the estate plan built into it, also is branded for the advisor. The advisor's name, the advisor's phone number is put in front of the kids, the adult kids,
Yep.
and now they know not just a name, they know their contact information, they know the face, and they know that this advisor knows everything about our family. So then the decision of, I'm going from somebody who I don't know, I've never spoken with, I have no idea what they know, to I know that my parents' advisor actually knows all about us, knows
Right.
about our family, everything's in place. Why would I disrupt that? Very,
Exactly.
very different approach.
Yeah, that's great. One question that already came in from somebody, one of the attendees. Um, so in regard to vanilla and producing, documents, how do you kind of manage variations among the 50 states with that platform?
Each set of documents is state specific. So
Okay.
if you go on the Vanilla website, you'll see, I think we've got 15 states rolled out now.
Yep.
And we just add states as there's a demand for states. So we hire an attorney that's licensed in that state. They review our set of documents, make them appropriate for that state. They're reviewed twice a year in that state. And then the lawyer that works with the client is licensed in that state. So every client has the ability to use their own counsel if they want, but chances are it'll just cost them more. They can use one of our lawyers if they want, and or they can go without, which nobody really would do or should do because there's no additional charge to use the attorney.
Sure.
So that's how we stay up with all 50 states. We got to make sure each one is state specific.
Got it. And that what you just said about using your own counsel may be part of the answer to another question that just popped in from somebody. How do advisors using vanilla kind of stay in good graces with estate planning attorneys that they view as a source of referrals of business?
So I'm going to put my advice period hat on for a
Yeah.
second. I work
Yeah.
with a ton of estate attorneys and
Uh-huh.
30 years in the business. I can think of a handful of times I've actually gotten referrals from the estate planning attorney. So I think it's one of those things that advisors like to think of as a real COI, but I would just tell you first, we should always do what's best for the client,
Mm.
even if it means replacing somebody who's not doing a good job. Second, how do you know if they're doing a good job? So it's worth at least checking. And third, we're starting to see lawyers actually, particularly smaller lawyers, adopt our system because it makes their practice more efficient. So
Mm.
they can very easily use our documents, use our system, and it will save them time as well.
Well, and based on what I just heard you say, an advisor could use vanilla to generate documents, but then keep that estate planning attorney in the loop if they really felt like that was important, by having them do the review, and kind of putting some of the business that way.
Yeah, and ironically, the top firms, because my client tends to be a state taxable client, and the lawyers that we typically deal with don't even want to do the core business. They see that as a burden. It's not as exciting. Now, there are lawyers whose entire practice is doing basic planning, but for the ones that don't want to do it, this just makes their life easier. They're very happy to bring those documents in and then do the more complex planning, which is more intellectually stimulating for them,
Yeah,
perhaps.
makes sense. So for the financial advisor who asks, like, look, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an expert at estate laws. Like, how can I really help my clients with this, on this topic? Don't I kind of need to bone up and become an expert on estate planning if I'm going to leverage this kind of platform to offer that as a part of my practice?
I think you need to know enough to know what a will is and a revocable trust and basic
Uh-huh.
stuff. And I think that's true regardless.
Yep.
I don't think they need to become experts. The review process says, here's what you've got, here's where it goes, here's what's missing, here are the opportunities to improve.
Yep.
I think what the advisor should be able to do is say, look, I'm not an expert in all this, I'm not an attorney. We had this reviewed by attorneys. Here are the things they highlighted. It's identified that there are things, opportunities for you to improve upon your plan, and I can direct you to someone to do it, or you can use this system to do it. There, the advisor has become a conduit, the general contractor that we are meant to be, and they're hiring the right plumber and the right builder and the right whatever they roofer to build the proper house,
Yep.
as opposed to knowing how to do all those things. The general contractor is not an expert at everything; they're a very good generalist.
Right. Right. Great point. And I mean, based on that, it sounds to me like it would be, there, from the review to the changes you're talking about to the changes in tax law, it sounds to me like I definitely shouldn't be thinking of estate planning as a one and done event for these clients. This is something that needs regular review. And that's also kind of a conduit of ongoing value from the advisor to be the person who prompts that conversation of regular review.
100%. And the software is hopefully designed to help the advisor look good by prompting them with what they should prompt the clients with.
Sure.
So the exemption has changed multiple times since I've been in this industry. Tax law has changed dramatically. If you've got IRAs and Roths, we've just seen rules around that change and how long you can run those out versus before. So all those things are constantly changing. And one of the things that I didn't even think about for myself, because my kids are both adults, but not married, don't have substantial assets. They're in their early 20s. I didn't even have HIPAA and healthcare releases so that my son who's in college, if he got hurt, playing sports and was in the hospital, I didn't even have full access to his information. And so those are the simplest documents. We've got them online for $99 to make sure that families are protected in an emergency. It's back to insurance. We all understand why we need insurance. Well, these documents are a form of insurance to make sure that you're not scrambling around trying to get information about what happened to your adult child.
Yep, makes total sense. I think, by the way, I forgot to say at the beginning that if you have questions, you can type them into the chat box. Some of you have figured that out already and have been sending your questions in, which is awesome. But we've got the guy here, Steve Lockshin, answering questions here about how advisors can leverage estate planning to drive their value. So by all means, if you've got questions, feel free to put them in. And I've got a few more stacked up here from folks already. But one of the questions immediately is going to help the advisors who are listening today. And by the way, I just want to say up front, here at Riskalyze, we just love putting like great value add content in front of advisors. So this is a really good example. Like maybe we should be, but we're not investors in vanilla. We don't own vanilla. We don't get any financial benefit from this. We just wanted to put great content in front of advisors. But what you've built here, to me, seems like an incredible way that advisors can add another value proposition onto their practice. And one of the things that I can't remember the event, but I was at an event and an advisor said, well, wait a minute, if investment management is commoditized and financial planning is commoditized and to some extent estate planning is commoditized and all these different things are commoditized, like where is my value? And my answer to that is, well, wait a minute. Your value is that you stitch all of those things together and you just like help your client make the right decisions and follow the right behaviors to get to the point of success in the future, even when things look scary, even when things look complicated. How does that line up with what you've seen with Advice Period and the hundreds of advisors that you serve across the country with that company?
I mean, I agree with you. It goes back to my general contractor analogy. You cannot be an expert at everything. And ironically, I used to say that, and it's ebbed and flowed. You couldn't go to one place and get expertise across the board.
Yeah.
And that is probably true in our industry where you are the general contractor and you're supposed to know the things that need to be done, the places to get them done, and help coordinate getting it done. You're the dispassionate, responsible party to make sure that these things are accomplished.
Yeah.
But then we moved to actually the full stack solution, and the full stack solution became a buzzword certainly in the fintech industry. And I'd argue that it even moved away from that a little bit over the last decade, but it's moving back towards that. Now things have gotten so complicated. We've seen changing tax laws over, 2017, we had massive tax law change. I promise you we're going to see it again in the next couple of years. So with the regime change, it's really hard to stay on top of all that. So having an integrated solution is important, and the advisor is the integration. The advisor is the one that can pick the software, can make sure those things talk well together, and then communicate to a client in a way that makes sense, that's digestible.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So I think one of the questions, and I see this coming in a couple of times from different folks, but one of the questions that I think people, as they're thinking about this, they're going, okay, well, help me understand the economics of this. Okay, what is Vanilla's pricing like? how do I think about those economics, you know, in relation to, you know, the fees my client is going to pay? Is this something that I'm paying for out of pocket and just swallowing out of my fees, or is this something that the client's going to pay a little bit more to get documents done? Or like, talk to us about that. What do the economics look like for vanilla?
Yeah, the structure is advisors pay a per seat fee. It's similar to Riskalyze, other financial planning software. And from that, they get the reviews and the CRM system and can put all their clients in there. If the clients need documents, the clients pay for those documents. Now, while it's perfectly legitimate for an advisor to pay for a client's legal fees, the legal relationship with the client needs to be with the lawyer for not only confidentiality reasons, but also to protect the advisor, again, from UPL.
Got
So
it.
99 out of 100 times, I mean, probably more, the client is paying for it. So when I encounter somebody who has old documents, no documents, I got a client just moved, did their stuff in vanilla last year and just moved from California to Florida, send them a link, they do their stuff online, they pay for it. But the client sees me as the person who coordinated it, who reminded them they needed to do it, who answered a few questions around it. And we even, again, in non-COVID times, set it up where the advisor can download the paperwork and have a signing party with a notary there if they want, so that they're seen as handling the last mile.
Yep.
And now the advisor is seen as the coordinator of the estate planning.
Got it. Got it. Would you say, well, one question we got from somebody, is there, talk about like the ideal client profile that is a good fit for an advisor to use vanilla for their documents? Is there a client that's not ideal?
The client, anyone, in fact, there's about 4 or 5 weed out questions when you
Yeah,
go in to do your core documents. And we're just talking about core documents here.
sure.
Anybody who has special needs, who's got elder care, or wants, I'll call them bespoke dispositive terms
Hmm.
in there. So if you want something crazy fancy, you're gonna have to pay for someone to go write it. The challenge with the industry, the legal industry, is every lawyer has their own forms and their own documents. They're just forms. They
Right.
just end up sticking the same thing in there, and they'll craft some specific language for the client if they want it. It can all be made very, very simple. And so the first couple hundred that we ran through, we saw how to hone the questions so that we got the right information from the client, and then the documents came out appropriately. So anybody who has a regular set of circumstances, and that can be second marriages, it can be anything, just doesn't want something bespoke or doesn't have a special needs situation, it works fine for.
Gotcha. While I know we're getting close on time, team, why don't we go ahead and pop up that poll? If you're directly interested in chatting with somebody at Vanilla, by the way, or interested in chatting with, you know, us at Riskalyze for any of our tools to help clients think about retirement and all those other topics, we'd love to chat with you on that as well. Looks like I have to fill out the poll as well, so I'm just going to say no thanks, I'm good, because I mean, Steve, I already know you, so I think we're good. But in any case, Matt, is this popped up and kind of blocking everybody, because everything's disappeared off my screen while this is up?
Yep, I'm gonna pull it down in just a second, and but you guys can continue to converse in the meantime.
Okay, all right, just checking.
I've been using hand signals, so I guess that didn't come through.
There you go. There you go. So one of the questions, and I think you kind of touched on this, but expound if you'd like. The question came in: does the advisor, the client, and the attorney kind of have access to the platform for any given estate? How does that work?
So any client that an advisor puts on, they've got access to the information. If they go through the document process, it populates the CRM piece, or they can add clients to the CRM piece, and it'll slowly start picking up more and more information. They authorize if they're using one of the lawyers in the system, then the lawyer obviously has access to everything too. And each client authorizes the advisor into again, to protect them from UPL, authorizes them to see their documents. So they can say, no, I don't want my advisor to see the documents, but they generally say, yes, I want them to.
Got it. And a bunch of questions coming in. I'll just say, by the way, if we don't get to your question, please don't take any offense, but I know the team at Vanilla would be happy to answer any question that you might have. By the way, what is Vanilla's website? That is one of the questions that came in.
Justvanilla.com.
Justvanilla.com. Okay. That was kind of a vanilla question if you think about it, but I had to go for it.
Quite plain, quite a plain question.
So talk about, because we didn't set this up to be like a product demo per se, but there's obviously some curiosity here. One question was, how involved is the advisor in gathering all that information for the estate plan? So that's kind of what you've really automated with Vanilla, where the client gets to walk through and like gather all that information. So it's not really on the advisor to do that, right?
Right. In fact, early on, one of our advice period advisors, I'd say, what's taking so long? He's like, well, we go through a pre-questionnaire and we get the information and we populate it for the client. I'm like, no, you're making this way more complicated than it is. The questionnaire is designed for the clients to go through it. It's super simple. The advisor doesn't have to insert themselves into the process. And there's even a button that says on each question, I'm stuck on this question, and they can leave details about where they're stuck, and either the advisor or the lawyer can answer that question when the review pops up.
That's really great, because I gotta, like I've gone through that process. My wife and I have a trust and a bunch of other stuff set up. And I mean, like the attorney is a good friend of mine, somebody I trust, great guy. But what I got was like a 50-page PDF file that I had to go in and like type a bunch of stuff into, right? And it would have been great to have a much more dynamic, user-friendly process with a great experience, to walk through. So it's definitely a gorgeous experience that you guys have built for advisors to brand and kind of show as their estate planning experience.
Yeah, and for the folks who are listening, if you go to justvanilla.com, there's a button on there that says sample reports. You can actually download a sample report. And to Aaron's point, most lawyers are using Visio or PowerPoint to make what is a generally ugly picture of what's going on, or give you an 8-page summary of what your documents mean, which is not what people want. They want to be able to see the flow with a couple simple pictures. So our folks, I think, did a really nice job making it easy to digest, as I said, and very, very accessible. And if something changes, it changes on the fly, so you can get an updated printout.
Yep. Had an integration question from one advisor. Steve, you kind of mentioned having a mini CRM in the app. Any integrations with like Salesforce, Redtail, or other kinds of tools like that to kind of port that info into those environments?
So it's built with APIs on both sides, so information can be pushed in as well as pushed out. The first CRM integration that we'll do is Salesforce. We're on Salesforce.
Okay.
That's obvious why that's our first place.
Yep.
Short answer is not yet, but yes, coming this year.
Got it. And then let's see, how many, this is an interesting one, how many different trusts can the system handle at one time? I assume it meant for one client, because you can probably handle an infinite number of clients.
Yes. So you can do with one email, you could do 2 trusts effectively for clients. So you could do, if you live in a community property state, you could have a community property and a separate property trust. But with as many emails as you want to use, like if you have a Gmail account, you can put plus whatever you want,
Gotcha.
plus personal, plus number 2, number 3. You can do as many as you need.
Yep. Awesome. And let's make this the last question, because I know we're kind of close on time, but an advisor was asking, can we log in and kind of monitor the progress that the clients make towards getting the questionnaire, getting the information gathered? What's our visibility into kind of monitoring the progress and the information along the way?
Yep, there's a dashboard for advisors. They can see when their clients logged in, how far along they are in the process, if it's being reviewed. The lawyer has a similar dashboard, so they can see what's in their queue. They can see the family CRM information. They can see the diagram. So they've got full dashboard access for the clients.
That's pretty cool. Well, it's not too often that somebody comes along and creates a technology solution that can actually add another line of business onto an advisor's practice. So I don't know. I was just intrigued when you told me about this and gave me an early look at it. I remain excited for you, remain excited primarily for the advisors who are going to be able to do great work for their clients by putting estate planning kind of front and center for them as well, and add to the unique value proposition that they provide. I have been a long believer that frankly, I mean, I hear advisors talk and worry about fee compression all the time, and I'm a bit of a contrarian on that. I go, financial advisors do not have to worry nearly as much about fee compression as almost anybody else, because like, you want to talk about fee compression, go look at the asset management layer of the stack, right? Because how many more bond funds can we have? Okay. You want to talk about fee compression, look at some of the service providers above the advisor where there's lots of choices, but the financial advisor is that trusted person that the client looks to for the solution to these problems. And to be able to add something like estate planning to the level of value proposition that an advisor can provide to their clients in being that financial coach and being that behavioral coach and helping them make the right decisions to get successfully to the other side, to me, that's just really exciting. It's something that you know, technology was kind of destined to make better. And you know, kudos to you and your team for doing something great to push that forward and doing it in a way that actually supports and helps financial advisors. You know, I would argue that there's probably people out there only thinking about this, like bypassing the financial advisor. And the truth is, this is going to be way more successful because financial advisors are at the heart of it, and they're that trusted resource for the client. And I think financial advisors should be more confident, not less confident in their value. But that's even more true when they can add a value proposition like estate planning to the mix.
Well, I appreciate you coordinating this. And to your last point, there are already a bunch of direct to consumer providers of documents that actually do cut the lawyer out of, I mean, excuse me, the advisor out of the process.
Yep.
And I don't think that benefits the client, and obviously doesn't benefit the advisor. So we wanted to take that general contractor and give them another set of tools that they could use. And that's our objective here. So, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us to do this work for our clients regardless. Clearly I have a vested interest in that, but I do think it's important, because all you gotta do is look at your own family circumstances and say, what would happen if I passed away and didn't have documents or up-to-date documents? And that really explains the problem right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Steve, thanks again for joining us today. Thank you to everybody who joined us here on this webinar today. Hope you found it helpful, interesting, useful. Hope you're able to find Vanilla to be a great resource. And again, we just love bringing great value add content and resources to the tens of thousands of advisors that we're so privileged to serve. So to all of you, thank you for being awesome members of our fearless investing movement. We're so grateful to and honored really to have the opportunity to serve you and your firms. Everybody have a great day out there, and stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to hopefully even seeing some of you in person this year. You never know. You never know. So very cool. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
See ya.